Dear Professor Damaška, it is a great pleasure and honor to have you as the opening speaker at the IAPL World Conference in Zagreb. We are recording this video here in Zagreb in July 25, and it is truly a pity that you'll be returning home to New Haven in the United States and won't be able to join us in person. Nevertheless, we are deeply grateful that you have agreed to deliver your speech in this modern video format.
You just said that you were honored for my accepting your offer. I'm doubly honored, gratified, even flattered with the fact that you offered me the opportunity to address the conference. But I must say that I'm also saddened to a certain extent that I won't be able personally to participate in the event. Not only because I'll be missing out the intervention and discussions with people whom I greatly admire, but also because of the venue, Zagreb, because Zagreb for me is a locus romanticus. I spent the first 40 years in Zagreb, and when the best period of my life was already behind me, all my expectations about the rhythm of living and style of living were formed in Zagreb. And so I'm tremendously saddened that I won't be present at the event. And I must say that I continue being involved in legal and other aspects of life in Croatia.
Can you tell us a little bit about your continuing connection to Croatia and your activities when you are here?
Well, I used to compare my situation by using Nietzsche's distinction between Dionysian and Apollonian in your life. As far as Apollonian is concerned, that is reason. I actually don't regret that I left the country, because I would probably never be able to do certain things I can do now as a result of my life experiences. That is true. But on the other hand, the Dionysian aspect, that is to say, pleasure in life, I must say that I missed out, and on the whole, it's very hard to explain how I feel. I would say that I think that I would like to be remembered as a Croatian lawyer who has made it abroad, rather than maybe an American lawyer. I'm, after 40 years in the United States, I'm a loyal citizen of the United States, but my heart is in Croatia. And I continue to be involved. When I come to Croatia in summer, I'm usually offered to give a lecture. Periodically, I publish articles in legal periodicals. And otherwise, I'm involved in the life of Croatia by, for instance, setting up a foundation that would help prospective young lawyers, promising lawyers to study abroad. And I was also involved with the Croatian government in connection with the war crimes tribunals before the Special Court for Crimes Committed on the territory of former Yugoslavia. So in many ways, I try to keep the door ajar to Croatian life.
To get back to your legal writings, can you tell us how was Croatia, or your educational period, your upbringing in Croatia, how did it influence your thinking and your writing? Is there an element that you can recognize which is a connection to your once home country?
Well, I really never thought much about it, but I think that one element is my connection with now long dead Professor Vladimir Bayer. He taught criminal procedure in Zagreb Law School, and he had tremendous piercing intellect. and also was not concerned with the normative surface of things. He was very apt at looking behind the norm, you know, how it actually functions in real life. And that was an influence on me, a lasting influence, and it continues throughout my professional career. And then, of course, there were life experiences. Many people thought that I developed a certain methodology, or I should rather say classification of world legal systems. They say that was Max Weber. I was simply imitating the ideal types of Max Weber. It is not actually true, because the roots of this approach go back to the time when I was in Europe. I was a student of law in communist Yugoslavia, and also in a period where the Yugoslav brand of communism or socialism was not benign. So I had, of course, personal influences, how a certain style of government with totalitarian aspirations, how that affects administration of justice. And then, while I was still centered in Europe, I very often went to Western Europe and had some friends, German judges, etc. So I noticed a difference between, let's say, bourgeois, continental bourgeois approach to law, as opposed to, let's say, socialist approach to law. But nevertheless, I was able to function relatively easy, let's say, in Western Europe, if they asked me for some opinion, etc. But a tremendous shock was when I came to the United States, because there were significant differences. So that I was actually in a similar situation as Karl Marx, who, after he came back from the United States, said, but there is no state in America. I was immensely surprised that so many aspects of social life were not interested to the state directly, but what we would nowadays call GOPs, non-governmental organizations, and things of that sort. So let's say part of my typology was a distinction between activist and the reactive state. I could also say between a maximal and minimal state in the, you know, to put the things differently. And so, like I said, the root of my approach was actually in Croatia. I just checked the other day, I started reading Max Weber 6 years after I published an article in Germany, which in essence was playing with this distinction between influence of administration of justice of certain organization of authority and functions of authority. Not that I deny that reading Weber helped me a great deal, but it would not be right to say that the roots of it, at the beginning of it, was Max Weber. That was really not true.
With your last answer, we are now coming into the ambit of the main topic of this conference, and this is efficiency. And we all know that much of your work was devoted to the study of criminal procedure and the law of evidence. However, your fundamental approach to the justice system is equally relevant for civil proceduralists, and we have many of them here in the audience. So many key issues pertinent to judicial procedures are shared by both civil and criminal branches. Do you think that judicial efficiency is one of these issues? And if it is, are there significant differences in how civil and criminal proceduralists approach judicial efficiency?
Well, I think as far as a concept, let me start with the conceptual prelude. I think that as far as the concept of efficiency is concerned, there are very little differences, very few differences among world legal systems. Lawyers tend to identify efficiency with speed and low cost. So that remains like a problem. The objective of proceedings is not part of the definition of efficiency. It's not like in microeconomics where you say you include desired output. That's like a goal into your definition, saying efficient is a situation where you achieve your desired output with minimum input. So as a result of that absence of the object in definition, consider an example that just occurred to me this morning. Let us suppose that you try to abolish written reasons for decision making, right? There's no question that that would speed up proceedings and probably reduce cost. Now the question is, are you going to abolish reasoned opinions as a result of efficiency? Probably not. Why is that, in my opinion, relevant? Because it shows that efficiency and, let's say, fair trial or components of fair trials like transparency, etc., are not joint maximums, as they say in decision-making theory. That is to say, you cannot increase them at the same time. More likely, the relationship will be similar to zero-sum game, where if you increase efficiency, you will in some sense harm the, let's say, values like efficiency and similar values, and vice versa. And therefore, I think one has to be a little worried about statements that are particularly formed with at the same time, let's say, increase efficiency and increase fair trial values. I'm not saying that it's impossible, but in many situations, something like a zero-sum game looks to me like a more realistic expectation. I don't know whether I should add something. You can ask me sub-questions. I don't know whether...
No, of course. Well, we can discuss about that in the context of civil procedure, because there the space is for optimization is probably greater than in the criminal.
I would put it this way. It seems to me that the concept of efficiency does not differ from country to country. What differs is the tolerance of inefficiency. That differs greatly. So it's not so much that the concept is different, but the willingness to sacrifice something for the sake of efficiency, that changes. To what extent there are differences here between civil and criminal procedure, you see, I never thought about it, so I don't want to sort of speculate. But again, what I think should be important and very careful, because there are situations in which someone promises both efficiency and fairness. Most of the time, that is not a realistic proposition. They are not joint maximums. They're more like zero-sum game.
I think you mentioned that the perception of efficiency and the importance of efficiency may be different, and this is exactly what I would like to ask you now, namely, well, almost all countries argue that efficiency is a value which is highly appreciated. But in this part of Europe, we have a situation not only in civil but also in criminal cases where lengthy and inefficient judicial practices persist almost endemically despite constant reforms. And this issue of efficiency may become particularly topical in debate. So what do you see as the reasons for the different approaches to reforms or to different outcomes of reforms? Are the reasons cultural or political?
Well, I remember reading an article by a certain Professor Uzelis, who was talking about, I think, Mediterranean approach or whatever. And there is no question, I'm also aware of it, that you can make this difference. Now, whether it is due to culture, I don't know, it maybe has something with dolce far niente in Mediterranean countries, but I'm not so sure. What probably should be borne in mind that I believe that inefficiency in some countries, maybe Mediterranean countries, is not so much a problem of administration of justice. It seems to me a general concept of, bureaucracy, efficient bureaucracy. So it's not only a problem in the administration of justice of some countries, but general inefficiency of state bureaucracy. And what I of late try to think about, and maybe we'll write about it, is the relationship within this problem and fragmentation of authority, concentration and fragmentation of authority. In my typology, it would have something to do with bureaucratic system versus system that have replacements, social replacements for efficient bureaucracy. And as historical forces work, there is a mixture and fighting about that. So I just speculate that it is maybe partially cultural and partially political, but not really, in my experience, lived experience, not limited to administration of justice. They're just inefficient bureaucratic machineries, generally in all sorts of life. How it can happen, I think it's the making the bureaucracy more rational.
Yes, but maybe we can also speak about procedure. And this is exactly the point that I would like to now raise, namely, procedure is generally viewed in the light of the opposition of adversarial and inquisitorial systems. And we all know your critical approach to this issue. But what are your thoughts on the distinction of adversarial and inquisitorial systems in the context of efficiency? Some say, for instance, on one side of the divide, that adversarial proceedings alone guarantee efficiency and accuracy. And within the inquisitorial tradition, it is often argued that inquisitorial style proceedings are more effective, that they are faster, that they are less expensive. How do you assess these arguments?
Well, I believe that the adversarial system is definitely more complicated and probably more costly than the alternative. Let's say a thought experiment. Imagine the situation of trying pro se, where you don't want to use lawyers and you want to act for yourself. I'm not trying to suggest that you're going to be successful, let's say, in continental Europe, I don't know, in France or Germany. But still, it dwarfs in importance to your terrible situation in which you would find yourself if you were trying to act for pro se in American proceedings. For instance, if only because the law of evidence is so complicated, you would open the door to all kinds of evidence that otherwise would not be admitted. You would be in tremendous trouble. So I think that the adversarial system in this respect is more complicated. Now, what you can say, okay, it's more complicated, but it is better in terms of fact-finding, as you just indicated. Now, that is an issue that has been fought and argued about since the 19th century, as perhaps you know.
The most powerful vehicle in the pursuit of
Wigmore,
truth. Yeah.
Wigmore, yeah. And there were even some tests. I'm familiar with some tests in America seem to indicate that American procedure is better in terms of truth finding. And there are some German continental ones which argue just the opposite. I have, in an article in University of Pennsylvania Law Review in '76, I published an article suggesting a test, which I think would probably work better than these. But to my chagrin, nobody ever tried to, realize this test. And then there's another sort of like explanation or justification for adversary proceedings that is other than efficiency. You may say it is better in terms of safeguards, procedural safeguards. And historically viewing, that is probably true. However, that is also diminishing, because if you look at the jurisdiction, or case law, I should say, of the Strasbourg Court, the European Court of Human Rights, you will find that, for instance, English attitudes on some safeguards are not as demanding as what the Salzburg Court requires. That is to say, the problem, what is more efficient in terms of truth finding, whether the adversary or non-adversary procedure. I published an article entitled Truth Finding Adjudication. It was published in Hastings Law Review. A few weeks back I read that, and that's the only thing that I'm really proud that I did in my life. It originated in my opposition to postmodern procedural thinking. But I then go beyond it, and what I say in essence is it is wrong to think about precision as between these two approaches, without realizing that to a certain extent it depends on facts that you have to find out. There are some facts for which the adversary system is better. It's like in a car driving at night. You have laser-like precisions on a particular thing. But then there are facts that you have to establish that require a broader illumination, where the inquisitorial proceeding may be better. So I would, even thinking about it and structuring tests, I would try to make a distinction between these two parts of the administration of justice.
Now we can get to our final deliberations. You mentioned the artificial intelligence, and obviously you are also following the development of modern technology. So what do you think will be the future of judicial proceedings in 10 or 20 years? What will be a human element? What will be a technical element? What will be taken over by artificial intelligence?
Let us take wings to the future. Let me start off by saying something that is only marginally relevant here. The question is human decision-making. Is human decision-making exclusively a matter of rational thinking? Because computers would, of course, help you very obviously with, let's say, precision of sorts. Now, the problem is that there are human decision-making, human decisions that are not purely rational, because there's some emotional moment involved, Dionysian and Apollonian thing that I mentioned at the beginning. And so there's a problem whether computers will be able to hit the right decision, because they may have a difficulty, at least the present generation of digitalization, whether it will have the capacity to pick up the rational moment. I know it from personal experience. Some decision-making people influenced me. That was before I had to come back and decide whether I want to leave Croatia and live in America. They figured out for me a schedule of what I have to do, and then they will be able to tell me whether I should come to America or go back to Europe. The result of their recommendation was that I have to stay in America. And there was a champagne party in my honor at the University of Pennsylvania Law School. In night, I woke up, and I woke up my wife, and I said, listen, I cannot stay in America. I have to go back to Greece. That was the love of emotion, love of the old country. Now, to what extent, if you're going to use computers, to lead the right results, one of the problems, which is not insurmountable with new computers, because old computers, they try to imitate human thinking. There the problem arises. But you have now a new generation that doesn't imitate that. It's simply you ask a question, and you rely on the ocean of information that the computer has, and on a sophisticated algorithm, it just gives you the results. Feelings will be established by these computers on the basis of some indication, I don't know, maybe expression of the face or who knows what. So I think that the future, of course, I won't be here, the future will be something that I'm not terribly happy about. But I think we are moving at a time when decision-making by artificial intelligence will not be something that is futuristic fantasy. As I indicated a moment ago, I think even at this moment, presently, I can imagine situations where two parties would agree, because they simply want a quick result in a few minutes. They would agree to abide by a decision of an electronic judge, artificial intelligence. Of course, you would have, like I indicated, like with arbitration, you would have to have a way, if for some reason you disagree with the way in which the computer was used, etc. That, of course, would have to be worked out by smart lawyers. But that it would be presently at this moment, that something like this would be acceptable, it seems to me, yes. I wish I knew what Tarufo and Hazard were thinking. They were both good friends, and both of them I'm only going to meet, I think, in purgatory.